What's up, everybody? It's Jenks from Queers and Steers, and we are back in 2025. I'm so happy to be here. I really admire people who can just do this all the time, or even just start a business and to keep it going, because, bitch, I work from home. I do this podcast from home. I just have to sit here on my ass. This is a new scenery for me. I'm sitting on the floor in my living room. It's very ambient. There's a candle. It's gorgeous. But sometimes I just don't, most of the time, I don't even have the energy to do this, let alone to create a brand from scratch and make it grow and do social media and shit. It's just exhausting. So I'm really happy to be here. And this episode today is really near and dear to my heart. It is Interracial Impetus, in which I discuss not only being biracial myself. My father is Black, Ghanaian, and Nigerian. My mother is white, Jewish, European. I'm also going to talk about interracial dating and how race, particularly interracial relationships, are structured and portrayed in the media. I feel like this is a really hot topic. And whenever somebody talks about this, I think particularly Black Twitter is usually up in arms. And in my opinion, it's typically the ones who prefer to be dicked down by white men only. But this episode is not to condemn anyone, because as somebody who grew up in the Midwest, I grew up around a lot of Black people, but also around a lot of white people. And I also had a moment in time where I feel like I was only dating white people, not necessarily by choice, but by circumstance. So when I get into the thick of this episode, I don't want anyone to think that I'm just a fucking hater. And I see the people's responses anytime somebody brings this topic up, particularly around queer Black men only dating white men, that people bringing it up are haters and lonely and we're just jealous and blah, blah, blah. None of which is the case for me, because I'm not jealous, sweetie. I'm happily in a relationship and I'm not jealous of you. And even when I was single, because I've been single my entire life, I wasn't jealous of you. So we're gonna get into all of that, but how was your 2024? For me, it was really eye-opening. I started taking Wellbutrin. I fell in love. Ooh. I got into some shit at my corporate job, which, looking back, despite it being really tough, catapulted me into a new space, which I won't talk about here on this episode, but there's a lot happening for me in 2025, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that with all of you. I also want to really thank my listeners. Me recording these episodes, it's really few and far between, and I generally don't have New Year's resolutions. However, this year, I am holding myself accountable to put out a piece of digital content every week. Just one, at least one. My numeric goal for podcasts, I want to release at least 30 a year. That gives me 2 to 3 every month, which I know is doable, especially considering that my screen time on my iPhone is 8 fucking hours a day. And I calculated how much time that's taking off of my life. And if I were to just average out 8 hours a day from, age 18 until I'm 70, I think it was 14 years that I would just spend on my phone. And I know I'm not alone in the 8 hours. Some of you are probably higher, especially people who are social media influencers, girlies, whatever. And so the thought that if I just laid in bed and scrolling my phone for 14 years, that's currently what I'm doing, essentially, by being on my phone 8 hours a day. That perspective, it just makes me sick. I know that's the age that we're in. We're always looking at screens. Even when I'm on my phone, I've got my fucking projector on in the background and I'm watching YouTube or just letting something play. It's almost like I just need this stimuli. But an old friend, Ryan Pfluger, just posted on his Instagram that he read 62 books in 2024, which is just incredible. I can barely get through one. I used to read a lot more, but I'm not anymore. And so, yeah, for me, really just jumping off and getting this podcast and my face and voice out into the world more in 2025 is something for which I'm holding myself accountable. What are your New Year's resolutions? I would really love to hear them. I have a new email address particularly for this podcast. It is hello at Queers and Steers. That's hello at QUEERSANDSTEERS.com. I really want to hear from you about your resolutions. I also want to hear all of your thoughts and opinions on this episode after you hear it. Again, I think it's going to ruffle some feathers. I think people are going to be able to relate. It's funny because I know people always have a lot to say about interracial everything. And before recording this episode, I attempted to garner responses. I asked people to email that email address with their thoughts, opinions, etc. And I didn't get anything. And that's fine. I know I still have a lot more to go in terms of garnering a following and a fan base. However, I don't know. I feel like now on social media, people don't really talk anymore. When social media first came about, people were speaking their mind and just having an opinion. Whereas now, I don't know if it's just people trying to curate a vibe on their pages still. I don't know if people are like uneducated and just want to observe, which is fine, which is all fine. I don't think we have the time to just sit back anymore. And I really hope that social media goes, like, it went from just posting your fucking latte art and cool buildings to the influencer era to politics and news, which thank God, because we would have been living in the dark all this time on the atrocities of not only this country, but like most of the Western global powers that be. We would have been in the dark. And now, like, we really need to get back to using our voices for good and to not only educate each other, but to build community. And the purpose of me being here, I always tell people, they're like, would you want to be rich? And I'm like, no, I don't want to be rich. And I don't necessarily want to be famous because I just don't like the attention. But I really want my voice to be heard because I have a lot to say. And I think it's challenging in today's social media climate to have your voice heard if there isn't also like a model face behind it. And don't get me wrong, I know I'm handsome, I'm comfortable with myself. Sometimes I'm insecure because of social media. Like, I wish it were easier for me to just be catapulted into my voice being heard, but I don't want to victimize myself either. Like I said earlier, I don't try hard enough to even keep this podcast going. So I'm not going to like blame society and Western European beauty standards for the reasons that this podcast isn't where I want it to be, but I'm now in a place mentally, physically, emotionally to continue making this podcast a reality and sharing it with the world. And so that's what I intend to do. But without further ado, let's hop into this episode. So for my first segment, I do a peak and pit. A peak is a high point since the last time we spoke, and a pit is a low point. So for the peak, for me, the veil of victimhood Israel has hid behind for years has been lifted. If Israel decides to completely wipe out every indigenous Palestinian in Gaza and build settlements all over the Gaza Strip, I don't think that their economy is going to survive. And I think we're seeing that in the news, that the economy is tanking. People are leaving in droves because of the bombardment on Palestinians, etc. I think that the public perception of Israel as well as U.S. complicity has reached a point of no return. And now that our eyes are open, Palestinians will live and see liberation. I truly, truly believe that. Even in the midst of everything going on, an oppressed people will always be stronger than our oppressors. So I think it's going to be much harder now under Trump because he is just as much in support of Israel as Kamala and Biden were, maybe even more so. Like, him and Bibi are just up each other's ass. But I think that Trump's presidency will actually jumpstart all of our liberation mindsets and our activism. I'm already seeing, we're seeing a lot now, especially with Luigi, allegedly, and this CEO shooting. I just think that, like, the veil of capitalism and apartheid and war, it's lifted, and we as people, we still have a long ways to go. I think people are still way too comfortable, similar to what I said about people using social media and not using it for what I think is its most important purpose, which is to share news and information and build community. But we already see that conservatives are ripping each other apart, and like Trump saying that he's cool with H1B visas, which is basically a visa for quote unquote, like, in his words, like productive and smart people to come into the country and work in place of US citizens who might not be as qualified. And like his base is really pissed off about that. Surprise, Trump doesn't give a fuck about you. He gives a fuck about making money, like Elon and Jeff Bezos and all the other billionaire CEOs, especially in the healthcare industry. So yeah, that maybe that sounded like a pit, but that's a really positive high point because our eyes are open and I don't think we're going to take any more shit, and it shows. My pit. So I actually wrote this script, I don't know if it was a month or so ago, but the moon, I think the full moon was in Taurus, and actually I feel like whenever the full moon is in Taurus, I'm going to try to track this because I feel like this happened to me during the pandemic as well. I definitely get in my feels. I mean, I get in my feels anyway when there's a full moon. As a Cancer sun, I feel like just water and emotions and the moon, it just hits me. And typically when full moons happen, I get in my head a lot about my physical appearance. And I hate that because I've always been like, I want to say that I've always looked like this, right? Like, it's not like you physically really changed that much in terms of your appearance, but I think a part of it is getting older. And even as a kid at 4 years old, I used to be afraid of dying. Like I would cry, like literally like 4 and 5 years old, I would cry like randomly. And my mom would ask, why are you crying? And I'd say, because I don't want to die one day. Like I'm scared to die. And she'd be like, Joshua, you are a baby. Like you don't have to worry about that right now. And then she would play Michael Jackson's You Are Not Alone and make me feel better. Oh, I love that memory. But I say all of this to say that I think anytime I see a new line on my face or whatever, or just seeing things starting to like droop, I'm 35. I don't know. It sometimes like, it doesn't get to me often, but especially when there's a full moon, particularly in Taurus, it seems, I tend to ruminate on those negative feelings and thoughts more than I would like to. And even now that I'm taking Wellbutrin and I love Wellbutrin and what it's done for my mental health, I feel like this sort of, I thought it was OCD, but my psychiatrist assures me that it's like OCD is something different, but I'm like, just have general anxiety and it tends to present itself when it comes to my physical appearance. So I'm working on that. I don't really know how I'm working on that. I guess just positive affirmations. But if any of you have any insights or if you have thought about aging or it's something that you think about a lot, I would love your thoughts and opinions, even just being comfortable with death, because I know it's inevitable. And I think perhaps my fear of death has always been ego driven, and I trust I've had multiple ego deaths over the past 4 years. So a new ego death, I don't think is going to help me. But if you do have any ideas or thoughts, or if you can relate to some of these feelings and emotions, I would love to hear from you. Again, email me hello@queersandsteers.com. For the next segment, before I get into the meat of this podcast, this segment is, I'm trying this out. This is called Don't Piss Me Off. This is a segment essentially where I detail a person or an instance in which somebody came at me sideways or just generally doesn't know how to act in society and needs to be educated before they hurt themselves. So for this first instance of Don't Piss Me Off, for me, it's driving etiquette. So I drove from Atlanta to Indiana to see my family for Christmas. It was probably one of the best trips back home I've had. My mom and I, again, we were close. We've always been close, but our politics and her idea of, I mean, it really just is her idea of, I hate to say it like this, it sounds shitty, but like her idea of reality sometimes, I think she kind of falls into the internet trap. And she definitely, despite how she speaks to me and about things when she's with me, she's still in Truth Social and the apps and all that stuff. And so like, despite all of that, I think she's just misguided and she's not like, she doesn't, I don't want to sound like an asshole. Like she's not far reaching enough to like influence other people to believe what she believes. I think she's just like on a bandwagon sometimes. But with all of that said, I did go home. Politics didn't come up. I do bring up Israel and how it's colonized because she's Jewish, right? And like Israel is a colonized state and what Palestinians are going through. I talk about how Trump's a loser. I talk about how Elon's a loser. So she's very aware of what I think and I'm very aware of what she thinks. But anyway, drove back to Indiana, really great trip. On the drive home, there was a really bad storm. And even before the storm hit on the drive, I don't know if it's just because I'm a nigga driving through the Midwest, but like anytime I tried to pass somebody on the road, they would speed up. They all had pickup trucks. They were all like, or they were like single white women in their fucking minivan or in their SUV that they can barely see above the steering wheel. And they would always like, they were all driving in the left lane, first of all. So I'd have to pass them on the right, which I hate doing. And they would always speed up. So there was one instance where they did this and I was in a Jeep and I had hella pickup. So I did it and I got in front of them. And like, again, I was driving faster than them anyway. They just sped up to not let me pass them. And I cut one of them off because I fucking had to. You're in the wrong lane. And so they basically chased me. They were like, it was like a man and a woman in the car in some like Nissan Rogue. And they were chasing me for like a good 5 miles because they were mad that I got in front of them. And like, especially when you're in the Midwest, like, again, being a nigga surrounded by white people on the road, like, I'm sure these people have guns. I'm sure that they want nothing more than to like pop off on someone, especially somebody who looks like me. But like, that aside, I know, like, should I be cutting people off? Whatever, who cares? Like, I'm a safe, smart driver. The reason that had to happen is because, and this is sort of the purpose of my Don't Piss Me Off, when it comes to driving, I don't know if it's just because people don't care as much. I don't know if states are just giving away licenses or are lowering their standards or their expectations when it comes to people, like the requirements for a license. But I mean, I know that here in Georgia, you don't even take a driving test. I believe you just take a written and they just throw they throw a license at you. They don't give a fuck. So in Atlanta, nobody here uses their turn signal. If they want to turn, they just basically brake check you and turn. Like no one knows how to slow down or properly drive or use a turn signal. And particularly on this drive in between India and Atlanta, I'm seeing this even more now than ever, which is everyone just drives in the left lane, which the left lane is the passing lane. If you are driving in the leftmost lane on the highway longer than 30 seconds, you are an asshole. You are in the wrong lane. Even if you're trying to pass someone or you feel like you're driving faster than everyone else. So like if the speed limit is 70 miles per hour and you're going 77, go off. Like cute. That's like a safe, that's safe. In theory, that's safe. But like you still need to get over to the right. Even if you feel like the lane to your right is still going to be moving slower than 77, there's a good chance that the people behind you are trying to go faster than 77. So what happens is people are behind you in the leftmost lane waiting for you to get over. You never do. They try to pass you on the right, which is dangerous because there's slower moving traffic, or there's supposed to be slower moving traffic. And then you either get cut off or you cause a fucking accident because this person is also frustrated and weaving in between traffic. So all of this to say, I guess a lot of this behavior on the road comes down to empathy, and how I think now more than ever people lack empathy. So I don't know what the fuck needs to happen. Some of y'all need to get off the road. The left lane is the passing lane. Do not just chill and drive in the left lane. I don't give a fuck how fast you're going. If somebody is behind you in the left lane, get over and let them go. And then when the left lane traffic subsides, you can get back over into the left lane. But get the fuck over when someone's behind you. If you know me, y'all know I love cars and driving and all that shit. And like people with piss poor driving etiquette is one of my biggest pet peeves. Don't piss me off. All right, let's get into the episode. Interracial impetus. Oh, let me adjust my body. I'm sitting on the floor for this because I just wanted to be a little more intimate. It's a little more vibey in my living room, sitting at my dining table, or I bought all this podcast equipment and table for my bedroom, but it's just, I don't know, it's just like cluttered already. And so excuse me, I'm wondering if this setup that I have right now in my living room is cute and like gonna be the vibe. But sitting on the floor hurts my ass, so we'll see. And I'm burpy. I'm drinking horny goat weed tea, which I just bought it from the store because I thought the name was funny. And I guess not the rumor, but its potential use is like horniness and making your dick hard. Me on Wellbutrin, 300 milligrams, already makes my dick super hard. I've been waking up in the middle of the night just erect, and I'm like, hey there, sweetie. Hey there, average. I need to go to sleep, okay? Go down. But when I drink this horny goat weed tea, bitch, like the blood is just flowing. I'm not hard right now, but I bet there's a good chance that I'll be hard by the end of this episode. So stay tuned on that. Delicious. Okay. I want to first talk about my own racial identity for a little bit. So, as I mentioned earlier, my father is Black. I believe he has one Ghanaian parent and one Nigerian parent, full African. My mother, white woman, there's some Native American in there, but mostly like Russian, Czech, white European. There's some Ashkenazi Jew in there as well. So I'm a whole ass mix of just everything. But especially as I've gotten older, a lot of people don't think I'm Black. A lot of people think that I'm Latino. And I understand why, like shaved head, mustache. I think people just think I'm like a foo, if that's still a term that Latinos use. Just like kind of like a hood, which I'm not even a hood, but just like the way that I look with like neck tattoos and shit, like that I'm just giving like foo. I'm not Latino at all. And so, and I would say I'm also pretty light skinned. I was really fucking dark as a kid. I have all these old pictures of me with friends on like the lake at my uncle's, and I was like, I had to get, I don't know what shade ranges are, but I was like 10 to 15 shades darker, I feel like. Maybe that's too much, but like I was significantly darker as a kid. I don't know if as you get older, like if it's, I don't know if it's sun damage. I don't know if it's just because I'm not out in the sun as much as an adult, but like I'm significantly lighter now than I was when I was a kid. I think when a lot of people look at me, they just don't assume I'm Black upon first meeting unless I tell them. I went to pick up Chinese food the other day and he's like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Indiana." Because I just kind of like fucking with people because I know where they're asking me. They're like, oh, they think that I'm like, you know, from somewhere else. And so I've heard Latino, I've heard Indian, I've heard Arabic, but rarely, again, do niggas look at me and think, what's up, my nigga, unless I like assert myself as such, which I think that topic is interesting. If you know Langston Kerman, he has a podcast with a few other dudes. Langston Kerman is the dude who dated Molly on Insecure that she broke up with because she thought that he was gay. He's the one who said that he like messed around with a guy one time, or a guy gave him head once and Molly just couldn't get over it because Molly. And he had a couple episodes on his podcast recently talking about like interracial relationships and how biracial people are like the worst because they're always like trying to assert themselves in Black spaces. And I thought it was a really interesting discussion. But like, I like the discussion of, oh, biracial people are always just trying to prove themselves. I think that's definitely real in the Black community. And I would say definitely go listen to his podcasts on those topics. I will link them in the description of this podcast on Spotify. But I will just say to that that's definitely a real thing. And I think as somebody who, again, has to like tell people that I'm Black, I think I just try to exist in my own space and do things that I enjoy doing regardless of the stereotype of race in relation to those things. And if somebody thinks I'm one thing or not a thing, it really has nothing to do with me at all. But I think you have to understand why somebody who ethnically is African American but isn't seen as such would feel the need to like compensate in some capacity, right? Because we're all human and we want to feel accepted by communities. And I think it's especially hard for biracial people who experience racism from white people all the time to then also have Black people say, well, you ain't a nigga, so I don't know what to tell you. You're not a nigga and you're trying to be a nigga, so like go sit at a different table. I think it's I think it's fucked up, and I think that everyone should be. I think that people need to be more mindful. And you know, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm light-skinned biracial, I'm such a victim, but like this conversation is an important one to have. Something else that has happened too. So like, I want to talk about this because a few months ago on Twitter, there was this dude, Black dude, who I was mutually following. He said something about like missing the old Ariana Grande. And I replied something like, exactly, Nigiana Venti was it, with like a laughing emoji. And he didn't respond to me. He quote tweeted my tweet and just said something like, what makes you think you could say some shit like that to me, ? And my first instinct was like, oh, he probably doesn't know that I'm Black. And like, but maybe he was just like maybe he just found it inappropriate for other reasons. I don't really know. Like maybe he knew that I was biracial and just like doesn't like biracial people saying nigga. I don't really know. But he quote tweeted me, unfollowed me, and then I DM'd him. I was like, yo, what's the problem? Because like, again, we didn't know each other in real life, but it was like mutuals. Like I think there was some like, we thought each other was cute type of a vibe. But then he just didn't respond to my DM. Maybe he blocked me because I feel like I can't find the DM anymore, which is valid. But like that shit, like, again, that's his prerogative, like valid, but it was just kind of weird. And then a few weeks ago, I was talking about something and said nigga on my story. And this Nigerian dude was like, responded back to my story. He goes, did you say nigga? And I said, yeah, what's the problem? He didn't respond. He unfollowed me. And then I sent him a bunch of question marks. And then he finally responds and goes, you know, I may have just become one of those people who gets upset when somebody says nigga and I don't know their racial background. And I was kind of like, hey, I understand that. I'm not going to try to like argue or convince you one way or the other. Like I'm biracial. Like if it's a thing of you thinking biracial people don't have the right to say it, I get it. If you just thought I was not like had no black in me at all, that's also fine. But you know, your opinion's valid. I'm just saying like, I've been saying this since I was like 4 years old, and I'm black, so I don't really care your opinion. But yeah, I just thought it was funny. So how I grew up, I want to touch upon a little bit. So I mentioned my mom was white. We grew up in the projects in Mishawaka, Indiana. It's right next to South Bend, which is Notre Dame. I think that's the biggest identifier of South Bend. And so a lot of our hood, it was like the projects for real, gunshots. Our car window got shot out a few times. A lot of my peers, actually a lot of my friends growing up as a single digit age child were black, like we were homies. But I think as we got older, they all started like joining gangs and having kids and kind of be like staying in that like thuggish, ruggish shit. And I was what I'm assuming people would say was effeminate. And I think as I got older, 8, 9, 10, the quote unquote femininity that I was exuding could no longer be protected by like childhood innocence. And so a lot of these dudes, these black men, I say, well, black boys, they were like my age or teenagers, started just like talking shit, like calling me faggot. One of them who actually passed away a few years ago, I think in a car accident, he used to say like, oh, Jenks be flipping them boys, which even though I'd never heard that before, and I haven't heard that term or phrase since then, I knew exactly what it meant. And I think that when you are like, again, I don't remember, I might have been 9, 10, 11 years old, hearing that and being hated on for, I mean, the perception of being gay, even though I wasn't out or didn't even know what I was back then, that's really fucked up. It's really fucked up. And by the time I got to high school, it was a pretty big high school. I think when I was a senior, we graduated with like close to 600 students, I want to say. And then there were 1,000 incoming freshmen when I was a senior, right? And of that entire school, my little neighborhood in the projects was essentially the only like poor black neighborhood to be within the boundaries of this school district. I don't know if it was just because, you know, the school district had like some diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and they just included us, but like the blacks, like all of the black schools were in South Bend, like the town next over, whereas us, it was mostly like white farmers or like white middle and upper class students. And so during that time, just by sheer percentage, a lot of my friends and love interests just ended up being white. Like the only niggas in the school were me and all the dudes from my apartment complex who, despite at one point being really close friends, ended up rejecting me and calling me a faggot because of how I acted. And so I couldn't be friends with any of them. So the people who brought me in and accepted me were the remaining white students by sheer volume. And even during that time in high school, and I mean, even before in middle school and in elementary school, like I was experimenting sexually with boys my age. Like, and the ironic thing is, it was like when I was at the age like right before they started calling me a faggot and making fun of me. So in essence, they were all DL. Like, I think I hooked up with maybe one other biracial kid who was like quote unquote flamboyant and ended up being like growing up queer. But all the other ones now that I know are consider themselves straight and or married and or have children. But we were fucking around in the stairwell. Like, I was, again, like 10. Some of these dudes were like 14. Just like nothing crazy. It was a lot of just like hand stuff. But it was just such a crazy dynamic to like be such close friends, meet their families, and just be a hood rat in the neighborhood with these kids, and then to experiment with each other, and then for them to discriminate against me. It was very much like a Moonlight situation. Oh my god, I can't remember his name. Fuck, Sharon. Like in high school, his own homie that he experimented with ended up being the one to like hit him and fuck him up. Very, very that. I was never physically abused for being gay or the perception of being gay back then, but it was enough to start to make me like question myself and my worth for sure. So at that time, I had a lot of white friends. I was becoming like punk and emo, whatever, wearing girl jeans and like going to shows and mosh pits and shit. And despite feeling more accepted than I ever have in my life, I was still the black kid in that group. But a lot of them, and actually a few of them have apologized to me as adults now because they were like, man, I was just like shitty. And did I ever say anything to you that was fucked up? And I'm sorry, blah, 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 which is super appreciated. But like my race was always joked about or commented on or even downplayed. Like I was, quote, the whitest black kid that they knew. So it was like, again, this is like the biracial fucking stereotypical story. Niggas didn't like me because I was effeminate and I have white feet. Like I've got a Jewish nose. Again, back then I was darker skinned, but like lighter skinned, whatever. And white people were the ones who were racist. And if they weren't racist and were just my friends, they would still kind of like always comment on my race, whether it was like, oh, you're the black one, blackie, or like somehow try to like always insert themselves as being superior because of my race. So, you know, these quote unquote friends were also doing insane fucked up shit, but I was still able to like live and breathe within those communities, which is like, hopefully that makes sense. And last thing I'll say about this childhood, like I always tried to, it's like I almost tried to make fun of myself before anybody else could make fun of me. So I always tell people, like, if I'm ever canceled for real, I always thought it would be this. So I think I was 18. It was like right before college, or maybe I had just gone to college and was back for break. But I dressed up as Ed Norton in American History X, like tattoos and everything. And if you haven't seen that movie, just Google Ed Norton, Google American History X, and you'll know what I'm talking about. I always thought that like a picture of me or something would show up somewhere and people would be like, oh, you're anti-Semitic or blah, blah, blah. Like, well, no, it was a it was a Halloween costume. I'm also Jewish and black. And so I think the reason I did that back then and why I chose that as a costume was it was a way for me to, I hate to say take power back, but in a way it's like, well, let me not make fun of myself, but kind of like, oh, it's ironic. Like the Jewish nigga is dressing up as Ed Norton, this fucking Nazi in this movie. Ha ha ha. So that way it was like I was controlling the funny, or like, yeah, I was controlling the narrative around the irony of why that would be funny versus somebody else making fun of me. So yeah, that was just like one instance of me feeling weird. But I told that to a friend recently. He's like, why are they like, no one's gonna give a fuck that you dressed up as a character as a black Jewish man. Like, but you know, the internet, people will see something and like turn it inside out or whatever. So that was always something that I just was like, well, if this is ever gonna come out, let me say it and explain the why behind it. So if you are yourself biracial, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions, like your experiences. I would suspect that a lot of us, especially those who grew up in like single parent households or had a rough childhood for whatever reason, can, especially if you're queer, because I think a lot of times that also goes hand in hand. Not always, but sometimes. I think that we can relate to each other And I would love to hear stories from people who maybe grew up in like a bigger city like Los Angeles or New York or Atlanta or Houston. Like, did you have similar experiences growing up biracial and queer? Would love to hear from you. Email hello@queersandsteers.com. Okay, now I want to talk about relationships because, as I mentioned at the beginning, this topic I feel like gets brought up pretty often, especially on Black Twitter, and the opinions are always mixed. And the thing about Twitter, I can't really stand Twitter anymore. I think it's still a great way to get news, like real fucking news, but now it's just overloaded with fake ads and people advertising shit and just like clickbait bullshit. And especially like, I'll say this forever, like niggas on Twitter, gay niggas on Twitter who have like more than 10,000 followers, some of them have like hundreds of thousands. They usually are like, they're either like super muscly and go to the gym and like showing their fucking the inside of their hole, which is great. Like I'm not slut shaming, but that's like the demographic. Or they like just repost other people's content, like memes and shit, and get like famous and blow up and shit. Which again, I'm not condemning that either because most of the famous meme accounts on Instagram and otherwise are white men, and they got famous by stealing Black content and turning it into memes. And I don't fuck with that digital blackface shit. That shit's real as fuck. So I admire when a Black person or a person of color in general like is able to garner attention and hopefully money from our own fucking content, bitch. Let's talk about that. But I say this because I think so I say this to say like a lot of the niggas on Twitter with a bunch of followers, gay niggas, are kind of like fuck niggas and just say shit. It's almost like any like straight dude with a podcast just saying some whack ass shit, like ignorant shit with no understanding or experience or backing. It's just like saying something within the realm of the Black experience to like condemn or just say some shit because they know it's going to get like a lot of attention. And so I think a lot of times when this topic of interracial dating comes up, it's usually these like gay fuck niggas who are like, y'all are miserable, you're single and lonely, you're jealous and all this stuff. And then it's like when likes were public and you could see the shit that they were liking, it was like always white men. So I say that to say recently I just saw a TikTok of this cisgender gay dark-skinned dude spends 3 minutes talking about how he feels like he's ugly because he keeps being rejected by men on Grindr. So he's talking for like 3 minutes, and then finally somebody like commented on his video saying like, well, Black folks just need our own space so we can love on each other. And then homeboy says this. I'm gonna play the clip for you.
And what you're saying is I need to create my own account. Create my own app for Blacks or just people of color where we can like ourselves. But here's the thing, even if I were to do that, it would still be some shit. Like it would still be some shit because gay people have this stigma, or I don't even know how to say it. I don't even know how to word it, where it's like, we want a certain type of body. We want a certain type of like aesthetic. Even me, I'm even realizing sometimes I could be hella like shallow with the type of niggas that I want, but I have to look in the mirror and just be like, okay, you don't like it when they do it to you, so you have to stop doing it to yourself. But yeah, what you're saying is I should need to come up with an app so we can all be happy. We can all get along and we can love on ourselves. Even though my type is kind of like Mexican and white, I'm really not into. I just feel like as a Black person, I already have so much chocolate. I already have so much nigga in me. I want to spread the love, you know? Like I want to spread the niggertree, the melanin. And I just feel like another reason why I'm not crazy into Black guys is because there's also this like trauma from Black men. I don't know how to explain it, where it's just like, it's hard to believe that a Black man is like gay, you know? Like, I don't know how to explain it, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from and what I'm trying to say.
So homeboy went on a whole ass rant for 3.5 minutes. Like, I'm ugly, I don't deserve, why is this happening to me, blah, blah, blah. And it turns out it's because white men don't want his ass, and that he is only or primarily attracted to white or Latino men because, in his words, he's got enough chocolate. Like, So this idea that being rejected by or not aligning with white supremacy makes you ugly or less than really runs rampant, not only in black communities, but in plenty of other communities too. Like, skin lightening is huge in India and like other Asian countries like Korea. I mean, look at SZA. SZA was fucking beautiful. I remember seeing SZA before she was famous. I always look for the video on my phone because it was in Chicago, like on the south side of this venue. There were maybe like, there couldn't have been more than like 150 people in the crowd. She just was like stunning. She didn't have any plastic surgery, just like, ooh, just like beautiful woman. And like, you know, now SZA, she got rid of her nigga nose. She got her BBL, go off queen. But it's just like trying to, like, erasing particularly black features for features that, in essence, a lot of these plastic surgeons in Los Angeles are white or white passing or white adjacent, and they're like telling you what's beautiful, and you're like erasing your fucking blackness for whatever. I'm not gonna get into a thing about plastic surgery. People can do what they want, but when I see somebody who gets plastic surgery, I'm like, damn. Even like the dudes, I don't even know where they're from, probably like fucking Russian or Ukraine or whatever, the dudes who got like big fucking schnozzes, like Eastern European schnozzes, or maybe it's Greek. I don't actually know, I'm being ignorant right now, but like, you know what I mean? Like the white dudes with a huge fucking Neanderthal nose, and then they get the surgery and it's like a little button, and I'm like, damn, you look good before. You could put that nose up, well, not my ass because I'm just a dumb top, but like, as somebody with the big schnoz, you could use that nose and it's sexy, but you wanted to get rid of that shit. What else? Who else does some whack shit? Like Latinos for Trump. Also trying to align with white supremacy. But as a black person, obviously, I've never really seen it like this sort of idea of like being rejected or not aligning with white supremacy making you less than or ugly. I see it a lot in my communities, in black or brown or biracial, particularly gay and queer people who make excuses for only being attracted to white or white passing men. And besides the black men on Twitter, the gay black men on Twitter who always try to make excuses for interracial dating, there's also, I know niggas, especially in the Midwest, there's something about the Midwest. I lived in Chicago for a number of years, like 6 years. Was it 6 years? 7. I lived in Chicago for 7 years. And like, dead ass, every nigga I know who's gay and lives in Chicago has a white boyfriend. Every single one. And maybe like, and you might be thinking like, oh, like maybe that's just my fucking algorithm, bitch. Like I'm from there. So I'm gonna get into some of my own personal experiences with dating white men and like dating within and outside of my race as well. But like, it's just like wild to see that like y'all ain't never been with another nigga. And especially the ones who like race play. I know a few of those too, but you know, I'm not gonna get into that. And so we see this all the time on television and movies. Like all of the famous gay and queer black men on the internet have been seen extensively with white partners. I have a list here, and I don't mean any respect, excuse me, Freudian slip. I don't mean any disrespect to the people on this list. This list I found, this is an old post on Twitter. So it wasn't like the coonery account, but there was some Twitter that basically just made a post of like all the famous black men and their gay white partners. And like, I was doing my own research on each of these people. I've never seen or heard or can verify that any one of these people have dated another black person. There's no photo evidence. There's no archive of this happening. And I'm going to say this list, and I'm going to get into why. Again, no disrespect to the people on this list. RuPaul, Bob the Drag Queen, Monet Exchange, Evie Oddly, Shea Coulee, Tadrick Hall, Titus Burgess, Billy Porter, Frank Ocean, Kevin Abstract, Coleman Domingo, Ryan Russell, Nikki Giovanni, and James Baldwin, which it's like, y'all are pro-black liberationists and y'all had white partners. That's just like, does nobody want to talk about that? Like, I need a psychologist or somebody to like listen to this and we can do a part 2 or something. But like, that was crazy to me. And fucking, who else? Zach Fox, which Zach Fox, he just married his Asian bae, a female, but like he a little spicy. That nigga's a little spicy. But like, as I mentioned, all the people on this list have only been seen with white or white passing partners. Steve Lacy deadass said, like he came out as bisexual, but deadass was like, oh, I would never date a nigga. Like just flat out said like, I wouldn't date black people. And look, I'm not saying that gay black love does not exist. I suspect, and this is the part that I think when every time this conversation comes up, like Bob the drag queen had a very like passionate discussion. I don't know if it was on his podcast, or I think he also had his own little rant on Twitter when this all came up about his like white and or white passing like Latino partners. But like, I suspect that all of these men had a similar upbringing or experience to me growing up that programmed them to seek out attention and community when theirs did not accept them. And when you sprinkle white supremacist tactics like Zionism, for example, which basically, again, controls everything we fucking consume on television and movies, it's no wonder why we never ever see two black men holding hands on the red carpet, right? Like all these people I just named, when they're out in public with their boo, it's a white boo. And I think that when the media establishment, who is always going to uplift and uphold white supremacy, even like black writers and black creatives, like a lot of their content gets to exist, even if it's centered around, I don't want to say centered around blackness, but like includes a significant chunk of blackness in their work. A lot of the spaces in which they are allowed are white-owned spaces, and there's something about their work that still upholds white supremacy and allows them to exist in these prominent spaces. You need to rewind that and listen to it again, because that is a word. And while you can't help who you fall in love with, you can't. You can't help who you fall in love with. I think you as a black person, a black gay person, a black queer person, are doing yourself a disservice by not trying to understand why it is that if you look back through all of your dating history, your Grindr profiles, your scruff, sniffies, whatever, that you were only talking to Eurocentric, white passing, or Latino men, and you were not talking to a single nigga. If your first response, when people talk about this, if you have a white partner or only date a white man, if your first response is to just like condemn people or like call them out, I think to me, that is your defense mechanism to not actually look inward and understand why you prefer white men over black men. And now here's the thing, if your type range is broad, like I find like there literally isn't a body type or a race or ethnicity, whatever, that I haven't been attracted to. I have stretched the gamut of relationships. But like I mentioned earlier, as a kid, growing up after experimenting and fucking around with all these like DL black men, I keep saying men, but like boys, we were all like under 18 when we first started experimenting with each other. Like after that happened and then they rejected me, the only people who let me in were white people. So from basically fucking high school until I was in my 20s, most of the people I were fucking with were white. And I had to fucking, like I physically, mentally had to sit down and be like, yo, why, like, how does this happen? How does this happen? Where does this come from? And how do I, like, what do I have to do? Like, I need to do something about this. And I think that do something about this is the thing that's like weird and uncomfortable and fucked up, because the do something about it is like, well, what do I do? Like, do I then just like only date black men? Like, how do I sort of actively like put myself in situations to like broaden your horizons in a sense? And I think, again, that's like really uncomfortable, right? But in a way, you are allowing yourself to erase the trauma of the rejection that I felt. So I'm speaking about myself. Like I was able to reset and erase the trauma of the rejection I had felt from like my black communities as a kid. And like, I just think, I remember bringing this up when I lived in Chicago in my 20s, when I first had this realization of like, yo, why have I been with so many white men? Like, where are the niggas at? And a few of my friends, one of them was Filipino. I don't remember who the other ones were. I think another one was also biracial. And they were just kind of like, this is what it is. I'm like, don't you think that's fucking weird? Because I was also talking to them because I know their shit. Like, they've also have never been with other niggas. So, like, and they're just like, oh, it just is what it is, you know? Like, can't really change it. Like, your type is your type. And I feel like you see that a lot on the opposite end of the spectrum where it's like, no fats, no femmes, no blacks, no Asians. Like, oh, that's just my preference. It's just my type. Well, your preference is rooted in racism and fat phobia. And it sounds, I mean, again, as a black biracial person, my shit was also kind of rooted in self-hatred and racism because my community was telling me I was not good enough. And so I went and found white supremacy at a point in time because that was the community that in some way was like, well, I wasn't good enough to be on their level, but I was good enough to be acceptable. And this idea of being good enough to be acceptable, I think, is where a lot of these particularly black gay men want to stay. And I think there's a significant opportunity to elevate yourself, ourselves, out of that. But it takes a lot of work. It takes therapy. It takes being uncomfortable. And I'm hoping by talking about this, I can help you all listening, if you can relate, get to that spot as well. The last piece I want to talk about in this interracial impetus episode is just highlighting some media, some moments in like pop culture and media in which the intersection of like race and interracial dating is seemingly at the forefront now more than ever. And I know a lot of people notice this, maybe discreetly or otherwise, but it comes up a lot on my feeds and I just want to bring it up. So a part of this is also colorism. So Flo, the R&B pop duo, when they dropped their album, so many people, again, even on fucking Black Twitter, were calling it corny. They were comparing it to Sierra or like other early 2000s jams with the tempos and melodies and just basically making it sound like it was basic. I love Flo's new album. I've been listening to it, not nonstop, but it is in a heavy rotation on my playlist. But yet, I don't see those same people calling out Charlie XCX. Like, how is that shit not corny? She's just like a white girl who does coke, who allegedly is friends with a huge fucking Zionist, but everything's brat. We've been singing That's That Me Espresso all summer. What the fuck is that? I don't know what does that mean? I have no idea what the fuck that shit means. Ariana Grande got famous by selling herself as an entire ass nigga for years. And granted, I've been seeing a lot more videos and memes on the internet about Ariana in her black days. I actually, literally like 2 days ago, I bookmarked, it got like hundreds of thousands of likes. It was, I don't know if it was her SNL performance when she was like a nun it's really hard to find, but somebody posted something about Ariana talking in blackface. And within a day, there's now a note on it. It was removed by a report of copyright from the owner. So Ariana and her team are like, delete the content of Ariana being a fake ass nigga because we all know, right? Meanwhile, and this is again, and I'm guilty of this too, we joke about missing her black years. Like, I'm always like, damn, black Ariana, like she was just giving better vibes and her music was better and boo, 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 boo. I don't necessarily think her music was better during those days, but I think it was just like, we were kind of duped, but we also just didn't know we were being duped and we didn't care to think about it because I think with the invention of social media and the internet and access, we've all become more aware and able to just like be upset. And we should rightfully be upset by her rise. Not only, it's tough because I don't want to say we should be upset by Ariana's rise to fame. I think that I feel like I've seen this where, and even in recent interviews of Wicked, she'll be talking and like the blackness comes out and then she catches herself. I saw that video a few months ago too. And so I think for Ariana, to me, it just comes off as she's inauthentic. It comes off as she doesn't have her own personality, and so she adopted blackness. And then when it was convenient for her, or because her team was like, girl, you're not black, you gotta cut this shit out because you're gonna get caught, she switched back to being a white woman. And great for her, like she's still successful and has a beautiful voice or whatever, but like the fact that she was able to just pretend to be a black woman or Latina for X amount of time, for years, and dating, what's that dude? Not Jack Harlow, fuck. Oh, what's that? The fucking white dude who's a rapper who passed away from drugs, whatever his name is. I can't remember. I don't listen to that shit. Even though I do like one of his songs. But anyway, that was like her ish, and she got success out of that ish. I don't know. I just don't like that shit. I don't like how anytime black folks do something amazing or want to talk about something, it's always and often the black community who wants to tear those people down while simultaneously not only lifting white people up, lifting white or white passing people up who try to steal our blackness and use it for their own personal gain. Another thing I want to talk about in the media space when it comes to interracial relationships or being biracial, I want to talk about commercials. So I feel like interracial relationships, they're kind of running rampant all over TV and media and movies. That new End of the World musical with Tilda Swinton, I think the two protagonists, like the one white dude falls in love with the black woman who shows up magically like underground in their space because like the world ended, whatever, and it's like, oh, they're in love, cute. Blink Twice was a recent movie with Naomi Ackie and Channing Tatum. Again, it was like all love, but like interracial, of course. There's A Quiet Place, same thing. Challengers, I couldn't even see Challengers. I'm like, I don't, like, y'all fapped, and I hear it was a really good movie, but like I do not have any interest in watching this weird, just like, it's this black woman, this light-skinned black woman who then has this fucking throuple, and of course they're both white men. I can't. Doesn't interest me whatsoever. Like the last mainstream movie that didn't involve Tyler Perry that had two black protagonists in love, especially like gay black protagonists in love, was Moonlight. That movie came out in 2016. We have yet to see two gay niggas in love on screen, mainstream, since 2016. I think a few years ago there was like that holiday movie that came out with man, I forget it's like Herman. I forget his name, but he's really cute. But like he had a white partner in the movie and it was Christmas and it was a really corny ass movie, but I watched it. Yeah, that was another one. Like we can't have nothing. We have nothing. And then for commercial wise too, I'm gonna put the link in the podcast description, but there's this commercial I love. Like I've been doing this for years. I can't watch television commercials without noticing like racist undertones or white supremacy sprinkles. It's always front of mind for me. Like I can't consume media without noticing the racial or like sexuality dynamics between the people in these commercials. There's a commercial, it's Infiniti, the car brand. They released a new huge flagship SUV, I believe it's the QX80. And there's this commercial where it's a blonde white woman driving her black medium skin tone husband. And then in the second row, captain's chairs, there's two black women. And then in the third row, there's two white men. So the whole car, the entire car is on some interracial, heterosexual shit. And the phone rings in the car. I'm gonna again post the link, you can watch the clip. The phone rings, and I think it's this guy named Frank, and he's like, hey, he's talking to the white woman specifically. He's like, hey, where are those files I need? And the white woman driving, pushes a button that like isolates the audio so only she can hear it in like the headrest speakers and the rest of the car can continue listening to music and doesn't disrupt the phone call. And she's like, the files are on your desk, Frank. And he was like, oh, you're the best, thank you, or some shit like that. And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, this is some weird like Frank and the white woman driving are having an affair. Because why in the fuck is like what, like one, why is she calling? Why did she answer like right now? Like maybe she's a lawyer and it's really fucking important, but like even her isolating the audio, and then it was like the white people had this like intimate secret little connection moment while like her black husband and everybody else is none the wiser of this little in-office connection. I don't know. It was just really weird. I've been seeing a lot of that like type of weird interracial shit happening in commercials. And again, I'm not trying to come across as like you cannot date a person outside of your race, because life is short and whoever you fall in love with is who you fall in love with. But again, I think there is a concerted effort, especially considering, I don't know the actual numbers here, but the percentage of people in this country who are just like white European who aren't mixed with something else is super low. I think I just saw or read somewhere that it was 13% or some shit, which has white supremacists and conservatives, people like Elon Musk and Trump, Project 2025, whatever, in a panic because whiteness is being erased and woke mob is trying to make everyone gay and blah, 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 blah. So like, I don't want to sound like I'm on the opposite end where it's like pure black race, especially because like I wouldn't exist if like there wasn't interracial sex happening, right? But I just want people to understand that if, particularly people who are black and only date white or white passing men, that there has been a concerted effort by the media our entire lives to convince us that our black bodies are not worthy and that we are only acceptable if we are in association or relation to whiteness, including our partners. So I just need you to think about that. I really do. And the last thing I'm gonna say, because this comes up a lot too, is like Drake versus Kendrick. So a lot of y'all, and this isn't just like gay black niggas who only date white men. This is for all, like any black person who has been supporting and lifting up Drake for years. I've been saying Drake is a corny nigga for years. I went back on my Twitter and I was like, I know I used to talk shit about Drake. I searched his name in my own tweets. And I have a few tweets of being like, Drake is corny. Like, why do people like this nigga? Like, just annoying, just like pick me, just coony. Like, I don't know. I didn't really like his shit. Again, that's fine. I'm usually right about most shit. But you all emboldened Drake and other corny light-skinned niggas for decades. And why is that? Because sometimes we're all just tools of white supremacy because, like I said, we are being conditioned to uphold colorism and platforming just light-skinned niggas, even if they're fucking awful. And then all of a sudden, instead of holding yourself accountable when these corny light-skinned niggas do some whack shit, you just point fingers and say that all light-skins are trash. Like myself, or Amanda Seales, Amanda Seales is a full-ass black woman, but she went on Shannon Sharp, and the first thing out of his mouth was like, so you're mixed, or you're biracial, whatever he said. She was like, no, I have 2 black parents. Like, that was the first thing out of his mouth. Meanwhile, Amanda Seales is one of the only people, who was in Hollywood, who had access to Hollywood, who speaks up and out for black liberation more than SZA, more than Nicki Minaj, and her fucking alleged, I don't even think it's alleged, her fucking abuser ass husband, Beyonce. Like, y'all love to be like, oh, Beyonce, powerful, blackness, blah. That bitch has been using an American flag, which is a symbol of fucking slavery and hatred. During the Palestinian uprising, Israelis were fucking playing her song while bombs were going off in Gaza. And like, girl, you could cancel that shit. You could shut that shit down. Or you could say something, but no. And then she went and supported Kamala and endorsed Kamala, despite Kamala being a fucking genocidal maniac as well. But anyway, I digress. You just decide to say, oh, you know what? These light-skinned niggas, like, y'all don't belong in the conversation about black liberation just because we're light-skinned or biracial, even though we are as pro-black as you can possibly fucking be. Kai Cenat is one of the most popular streamers. He said some homophobic shit multiple times and does homophobic shit. Joe Budden said that Megan Thee Stallion was lying when Tory Lanez was on his shit. The same black women, a lot of black women, being in Atlanta, so many black women ride down for Chris Brown, like 10 toes deep. But yet they're the first people to post some hotep shit about how Africans are losing their spirit because men want to wear dresses. Cough, cough, Summer Walker. Yep, I see that shit that she reposts. Meanwhile, her entire body looks like a trans woman is on her fucking mood board. So please, spare me. Spare me with this like light-skinned biracial people aren't actually black because of the tone of our skin. I think you are really just defensive because you are so caught up in a lot of shit that is just white supremacy veiled as like cool black shit. And you would rather just point the finger at actual light skins who are actually putting in the work to like push black liberation forward. Run and tell that. All right, I've been babbling for a while. I can't see how long I've been recording because my camera is far away, but it's probably at least an hour. So let me wrap this shit up. I'm not saying interracial relationships should not exist. I would not be on this earth of my Ghanaian Nigerian father if he didn't fuck with vulnerable white women. Nor would I be here if my vulnerable white mom didn't have jungle fever like a motherfucker. It was funny. Over Christmas, I showed my mom a picture of my black boyfriend saying how handsome he was. And she goes, you know, no offense, but a lot of your other boyfriends weren't cute. And like, I almost got mad. I was like, bitch, who the fuck do you think you are? But honestly, I just said, that's because they were white and we know your type. Oh, my mom loved niggas, but we had a good laugh. We had a good laugh at that. But what I am saying is it's really regressive and dismissive to be a nigga who can look through their Rolodex of partners, scroll through all the conversations that you have on Grindr, on Grindr, on Scruff, and 90% of them are white or white passing men. And to chalk it up to it is what it is erasing your own history of trauma and therefore potential recovery while continuing to uphold white supremacy, while at the same time gaslighting any other black person who tries to talk about this topic. I mentioned this earlier. I had my own little aha moment while I was living in Chicago in my mid-20s about why a lot of my partners as an adult, after this childhood exploration, were all now white or Latino men. And I'm not gonna get into the thick of that experience here on this podcast. I know I talked about it a little bit earlier. I don't wanna be redundant. I wrote an entire ass memoir during the pandemic, and I'm gonna want y'all to buy that when it comes out. So I'm gonna keep this full story to myself, but it's an important story to have and an important thought process for yourself if you can relate to this. So in the meantime, I challenge any and all gay black men, queer black men, who prefer white dick and pussy, yet try to shut down this conversation, to have your own reflections. Talk to your therapist, talk to your psychiatrist. Even if you're in the apathetic, oh, it just is what it is crowd. Maybe you've been with your white partner for like a decade and you're like, well, it's just, I'm not going nowhere. You still might learn something about yourself if you just reflect on all this shit. And if you're one of my gay white listeners who is only attracted to black men, I could diagnose you real quick right now. But that's not my current ministry, so you all can just talk amongst yourselves. As I said, this topic always gets everyone riled the fuck up, so please be riled the fuck up. Leave comments on this episode. Email me your riled the fuck up comments at hello@queersandsteers.com. I want to hear solidarity comments, questions. You can cuss me out. I don't give a fuck. But I want to hear your opinion on this topic because clearly I have a lot to say. Like I said, my goal for this channel is at least I want to get 30 episodes a year. I want to post more content. You'll be hearing a lot more from me in 2025. I'm so grateful to have my voice and this platform, and so grateful for everyone's support. Stay gay, use your turn signal. Talk to you soon. Happy 2025, y'all. Peace.